a live look at Indianapolis downtown. The sun is setting. That is courtesy of the webcam out at Indianapolis. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grid Live Post Race Edition. My name is Joe Samriego. Kobe Lambeth will be in shortly. Of course, he has a very busy schedule with all the reporting that he is doing, but we are definitely on the air. For all our viewers, definitely share your comments, questions you may have about the racing that we saw all weekend, whether it was Formula One, IndyCar, or NASCAR. We'd love to answer your questions as well on the air as we review all the races. So definitely we're encouraging everyone to please keep in touch with us. I know it looks like I don't believe anyone got pick a winner due to the timing of the race ending. We know nobody had got to pick a winner correctly for essentially the Brickyard 400. I mean, not the Brickyard 400, the Formula One race, the IndyCar race at Indianapolis, but we haven't had a chance to check it out. Meantime, though, definitely we'll get the program started. Once again, we want to thank everyone for joining us. And alongside with me, as always, one of my trusted partners here at the Grid Ranking, Kobe Lambeth. Kobe, welcome. How was your day so far?
It was pretty long. Felt like it was taking forever to get to the Brickyard 400. I didn't have a chance to watch the Formula One race, and I actually was planning to watch it after the Brickyard 400, but it doesn't look like that's gonna happen now because waited all day for the Brickyard 400. Then we had a little delay, and then we raced late into the evening. So yeah, it's definitely been a long day.
It's been a long day, especially for all the race fans, but overall, it's been a fun weekend overall. Definitely, let's get started with a little bit of the Brickyard 400. Now, essentially, the Brickyard 400 today, this was part of essentially the last race for the big weekend, which we had Indy cars and the Xfinity Series Saturday. So it all concluded with today's race. The race start delay was or start. The race start was delayed due to lightning in the area, but once we got going, one of the best moves we've seen so far this season was Kevin Harvick before the competition caution made a pit stop getting tires. This was a really smart move. Something where we talked a little bit about yesterday was strategy. Indianapolis Motor Speedway is a racetrack where you can go make a pit stop and not lose a lap if you're careful. We saw Alex Bowman lose that lap later on the race, but Kevin Harvick worked it perfectly with that competition caution and gained a lot of spots. But definitely the scary moment came during the competition caution on pit road. That's where we saw Zach Price, rear tire changer for Ryan Blaney's team, get pinched between Ryan Blaney and looked like the 48 as well as the 15 car in pit road. It was a really scary incident. I know definitely a lot of people were talking about it. Kobe, what makes IMS pit road so difficult, especially for the Cup teams? And is there anything that could be done about it?
Well, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway pit road is very, very narrow. I believe it's one of the most narrow pit roads, and for any track that NASCAR goes to, and it's just one of those unfortunate things. We've seen some unfortunate incidents on pit road, and even in the Indianapolis 500. I think it was, yeah, in recent years we've seen some members of the pit crew get hurt, and it was very unfortunate to see what happened to Zach Price from Team Penske today. Hopefully he's going to be all right, and I think it would be wise for Roger Penske and his staff to look into widening the pit lane a little bit so it's not as crowded, and when it's so tight like that, there's always opportunities for something to go wrong. And while I'm not sure if Roger Penske will look into widening pit road, and I'm not sure if that's possible, but it would definitely help make the situation a lot better for all of those involved. And first and foremost, hope Zach Price is going to be all right and make a full recovery. And I tip my hat to all of the men and women on those pit crews because they are some brave, courageous souls. It takes a lot of strength and bravery to do the jobs that they do, because I know, Joe, I would not want that job at all because it's too dangerous for me.
It is dangerous. I mean, folks got to realize those cars are going 55 miles per hour in pit road. So they're not just going like 20 or 30. Sometimes the TV makes them look like they're going slower. They're going highway speeds out there. So definitely they do a lot of work. I know we'll be following the situation. We hear more about Zach Price. We'll definitely share that on the Grid Network. Now, as we're talking about pit stops, pit strategies, and the cautions played a big role in the race today. We saw essentially it allowed William Byron to get stage one win using the caution flags and the stage break to get the win. But then stage two came around. That's when we saw again more cautions. But the biggest one was definitely a hard hit from Eric Jones. Can you explain, especially for fans that didn't watch the race, what happened to Eric Jones and what caused the accident for him?
Well, Joe, it really seems like a combination of the current aero package we're running, and then the abrasive surface at Indy, and also the Goodyear tires as well. It's in the corner speeds they're actually lot higher than they have in the past. Obviously with with this package where they're more on when they're on the throttle a lot more, and the like with the high amounts of downforce and the load on the tires and the abrasive surface. Eric Jones blew a tire and hit the wall at one of the worst possible angles that you could possibly hit, and very lucky for him to get out of there because in my opinion, that was one of the most vicious hits I've seen a stock car take at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
It was a very vicious hit indeed. I know a lot of people will be talking about later on what occurs in the race. One of the big things, of course, some of the other notable cautions in stage two. William Byron, he had a front tire go flat, debris in the backstretch, and then Ryan Blaney essentially got loose, pancaked the driver's side door on turn three exit. Kevin Harvick went on to win stage two. He looked really good all day. Then stage three comes down to essentially Kevin Harvick versus Denny Hamlin. This seems to be the battle that's going to be occurring week in and week out. Since we came back from the break because of the global pandemic, those two have been racing each other really hard. And an interesting thing, so we've been talking a lot about strategy, we saw Denny Hamlin pit, the next lap Kevin Harvick pit, and Denny Hamlin had a huge lead using essentially this strategy called the undercut. For fans that are new, exactly how does the undercut work for a team like Denny Hamlin today?
Well, to put this in the simplest terms, the undercut is like imagine like Denny Hamlin, like before he pitted, he was running second. Kevin Harvick was leading, and with this current aero package, when they spread out, it becomes a lot harder to pass. So when on the restarts, that's why you saw a lot of drivers jockeying for position, getting as much as you can go in and spread out. That's basically game over. No matter how hard you try, clean air is always king. When you're in the dirty air, it's very very difficult to pass, and the undercut proved to be a great strategy for Denny Hamlin here. And with the undercut, you if you're running second, or you're trying to in the undercut, it's typically a strategy you see in a Formula One race. And with Denny Hamlin, pitted one lap prior to Kevin Harvick, and Denny Hamlin was on fresh. Denny Hamlin had fresher tires, and he was getting up to speed and all of that. And then Kevin Harvick pitted one lap later, and a lot of times that can be a massive disadvantage. And it's always a game, be like, who's gonna pit first? Who's gonna pit first? And Chris Gabehart called in Denny Hamlin tried out the undercut strategy, and Hamlin had the new tires. He up to speed. Harvick comes pits, and Harvick was just getting up to speed, and Denny Hamlin was already up to speed, already had heat in the tires, and Denny Hamlin was all the way up the road, and he was able to secure the lead from Kevin Harvick, and until the unfortunate incident towards the end of the race that ruined Denny's day.
Yeah, as the incident at the end of the day, I know essentially that was a big concern because later on we saw Alex Bowman cut a tire, hit the wall really hard. That was a big hit for him. And then, of course, that was the eighth caution today. Well, we had about 24 laps left, an hour left of sunlight, so we weren't sure if we were going to get the race completed the full distance or end short because of darkness. Now, with 22 to go, they did restart. Denny Hamlin essentially was able to go ahead and take the lead. The track was at full shade, so a much more cooler racetrack compared to what we had earlier in the day. And he looked pretty hard to beat. Kevin Harvick did get a run early on after the restart, but then was unable to catch up. Matt Kenseth was right behind Kevin Harvick the entire time. And then with about 7 laps to go, entering turn one, Danny Hamlin, the leader, blows a tire, hits the wall really hard, and that essentially ends his day. Thankfully, Danny Hamlin did climb out. We were so happy, as one viewer said, that we're so happy to see that Danny Hamlin isn't hurt. And one of the things we saw from Kevin Harvick's team was the respect between the two. Even though they've been racing each other really hard, the two of them have a lot of respect. Had Denny not crashed, do you think we'll be talking about Denny Hamlin winning the race today?
Oh, absolutely. It seemed like Denny Hamlin definitely had the car to beat towards the end, and Denny had the clean air, and it seemed like that Kevin Harvick wasn't going to be able to pass him, and the only thing that was going to stop Denny Hamlin was a blown tire to end this day, and that was an unfortunate end of the day for Denny Hamlin because I myself thought that he was definitely going to win the Brickyard 400 unless we saw a caution, that gave Kevin Harvick a chance, and sadly for Denny Hamlin, the entire 11 team, they they were just an unfortunate victim of the situation today. With the tires, the aero packaging, and the abrasive surface at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, but I'm sure that I'm sure that it would have been much worse, if Denny Hamlin had been leading, coming off of turn four on the final lap, coming towards the checker flag, and he blew a tire. Then that would have definitely been a massive heartbreaker. I'm sure it would have been really hard to get over if he had his quote unquote J.R. Hildebrand moment at the speedway.
Yeah, I know that was one thing I was thinking about after the restart. We were essentially in overtime, and Kevin Harvick held on to the lead. He got clear of Matt Kansas. Of course, Matt Kansas, great run for him. Second place, looked like he may try to pull the Chip Ganassi sweep since Ganassi did get a win earlier in the weekend with Scott Dixon, but it wasn't meant to be. Kevin Harvick, his tires held up. I know I was thinking about don't blow a tire on the last lap, and he didn't have an issue and he took the win. So taking a look at the top 10 finishers for today's Big Machine Hand Sanitizer 400 at the Brickyard, Kevin Harvick, Matt Kenseth, of course, we mentioned the top two. Aric Almirola continuing his string of finishes in the top five. Great run for him. Brad Keselowski, Cole Custer, the rookie. Wonderful run for him. Kyle Busch, Michael McDowell, surprising run, especially for Front Row Motorsports. Tyler Reddick, Bubba Wallace in the 43, and Joey Logano rounds out the top 10 from the Big Machine Hand Sanitizer 400. Now, for all our fans watching and tuning in, definitely we're going to be following the situation with Zach Price, provide any update on the grid network. And then, of course, for anyone watching as well, be sure to share a comment. If you have a question, we'll try our best to answer them in the time spans we have left. But I know right now we're switching from NASCAR over to Formula One.
Oh yeah, Joe. The Formula One season kicked off today in Austria and it started with Valtteri Bottas snatching the pole with a new track record. And before we go any further with today's recap of the Austrian Grand Prix, I wanted to highlight that we had two first time winners in Formula Two. Callum Ilott won Saturday's feature race, while Felipe Drukovic from Brazil won the sprint race earlier today. And we have a lot of young guns looking to prove themselves in Formula Two in order to show teams that they are capable of being in Formula One. Yeah, Formula Two is definitely a championship to watch because a lot of those drivers eventually move on to Formula One, and if they don't go to Formula One, they usually carve out great careers in other categories such as IndyCar, Formula E, or sports car racing. So if you are not following the FIA Formula Two Championship, I strongly suggest that that's one that you should definitely pay attention to. And moving back to Formula One now, last year, Valtteri Bottas won the season opener in Melbourne Australian Grand Prix. But could he do it again today? And we saw a penalty that occurred with Lewis Hamilton. Saw him drop back to fifth at the start because he ignored the yellow light indicating that there was a caution on the course. And we also saw all the drivers take a moment to recognize the racism and inequality in the world prior to the start of the race. All of them were wearing a shirt that read "In Racism." Most of them were kneeling with Lewis Hamilton, who wore a Black Lives Matter shirt. So such a powerful sight to see. Still, the Mercedes proved that they are the team to beat as Valtteri Bottas grew a large lead over Max Verstappen of Red Bull. Lewis was climbing his way up through the field, and suddenly Max was out of the race as the car was stuck in an anti-stall mode, and Max did not make it to pit road and was done for the day. Ended up retiring. And the big battle during the race was between Sergio Perez, Lando Norris, and Charles Leclerc for positions 4, 5, and 6. And yesterday we actually mentioned these three teams would be around each other. So here's my question for you, Joe. Do you see any of these teams having a clear advantage on the other?
No, I don't. I know when it comes to what happened today, we got to take in several factors. The first one being towards the end of the race, Sergio Perez, he was on much older tires where McLaren were on fresher tires as well as Leclerc. They had made pit stops in a later safety car session. So he fell back, but he was looking pretty good all day, staying ahead of them, bringing the fight to McLaren, in fact. When it comes to McLaren, of course, they were looking really good too. They had the fresher tires and they were able to get around both McLarens around Sergio Perez on the older tires. And I was surprised Charles Leclerc throughout the entire race for most of the time was behind Lando Norris. He got ahead towards the end, especially it seems once the fuel was much lighter on the Ferrari. He seems to be a lot faster, so there's no clear advantage between the three teams that we were talking about, and I think it's going to be really good all year between those three.
Yeah, and then the first safety car came out after Kevin Magnussen experienced a brake failure, which was unfortunate for the Haas F1 team. And we had a total of 11 cars finishing the race, and that's the lowest number since the 2008 Australian Grand Prix, another season opening race. And so, Joe, you just mentioned we had 11 out of 20 starters finish the race. And why was it so hard for the drivers to finish today's Grand Prix?
One of the big challenges, especially for Formula One in the start, is a lot of times brand new car. The teams traditionally they develop their own cars, not like NASCAR or IndyCar where they get a spec chassis. NASCAR, a lot of teams have alliances with like Penske or Hendrick, so a lot of times they're customer cars. Formula One, technically everyone has their own unit, where is the car, the engine. So a lot of bugs could essentially occur during that first race that didn't show up in testing. Testing is a little bit more controlled environment. This year, especially with the pandemic, these teams have not been on the track since Melbourne, and they didn't even get a chance to hit the track in Melbourne. So that's why I think always, especially in Formula One, the season opener is a lot more unpredictable. And today was just a good example of what happens when you have all the teams with very little practice.
Yeah, and despite DRS, it did appear that passing was really tricky. And during the restart, when Sebastian Vettel, who spun his Ferrari when trying to overtake Carlos Sainz, and Martin Brundle on the F1 commentary team placed the blame on Vettel. Would you agree with him, Joe?
That I don't know. I know it seemed like he was going in pretty high into the corner. I don't know if he didn't thought Carlos Sainz would come in that low. It seemed more to me like a racing incident. Same time, we also got to take into account Vettel is trying to prove he's still number one in the points. I mean, not in the points, but in Ferrari. His teammate Charles Leclerc was ahead of him, trying to get around. I think there's a lot of pressure on him, and I think it's a little bit of both that occurred in that situation between Vettel causing the spin and then just putting the pressure on himself.
Yeah, yeah, and the second safety car came out when George Russell's car failed on him, and then the quick restart saw Alex Albon pass Sergio Perez for third place after pitting during the caution, but Kimi Raikkonen also will come into the green, which brought out the third safety car. On the restart, Alex Albon made a move on the outside of Lewis Hamilton for second, but he and Hamilton made contact, which sent Albon spinning around, and he eventually dropped out. What is Red Bull doing in response of this race?
Definitely, they're going to be looking over everything that occurred to Max Verstappen, having that anti stall ruin their race. Max said it didn't look like they had anything really for their Mercedes team, but still, they're going to be looking at it because they're coming back next time as well. So let's see what happens there. They're going to be looking at everything for that. And then with Alex Albon, I think they're going to probably give him a pep talk of like, hey, you had the fresher tires. Maybe we just take our time a little bit. DRS would have come into play, helped him out. But it's something where I feel Christian Horner over at Red Bull is pretty good when it comes to motivating the team and rallying them around.
And F1 stewards responded to the incident by giving Lewis Hamilton a 5-second time penalty. Do you think Hamilton should have received the penalty? And were you surprised that Mercedes did ask Bottas to let Hamilton by to preserve the 1-2?
I was surprised. I really thought when they said the 5 second penalty was going to come down on Lewis Hamilton, they were going to have Valtteri Bottas allow Lewis by so that way Lewis could get the clean air, try to extend his lead to the point where still Valtteri Bottas would get the win. Valtteri won't allow him to get towards too far ahead to essentially drop into second place. But as we saw, Hamilton just barely lost third place to Lando Norris. So I think that was sort of a, at the moment, missed call from them to not have that happen and allow Lewis the opportunity to get ahead of Bottas and try to get third place at least.
Yeah, and at the end, Valtteri Bottas ended up winning the Austrian Grand Prix, and Lewis Hamilton crossed the line in second, and Charles Leclerc was third, but would move to second, and Lando Norris has barely crossed the line within 5 seconds of Lewis to take third after Lewis received that 5 second time penalty. And here's the top 10. Yeah, I mentioned Valtteri Bottas was victorious in Austria. Charles Leclerc finished second. Lando Norris and McLaren take the final spot on the podium. Lewis Hamilton fourth after that 5 second time penalty. Carlos Sainz finished an impressive fifth. Both McLarens earned their top five today in Austria, which was great for the team. Sergio Perez sixth. Pierre Gasly seventh. Esteban Ocon in his return to Formula One eighth. Antonio Giovinazzi ninth. And Sebastian Vettel rounds out the top 10. And Joe, I just received some breaking news. According to Team Penske, Zach Price, the member of Brian Blaney's pit crew who was injured the incident on pit lane in the Brickyard 400, he's been treated and released from the hospital.
Oh, wow. That is really good news to hear for folks tuning in. Zach Price was the crew member that was hit, as Kobe mentioned. So that is really good breaking news to hear. So definitely wonderful stuff to hear from. Still thinking about him for a quick, speedy recovery. That's just really good news to hear. So
Hmm.
wonderful. Well, yeah. So F1 that was in the books. That was a great race. The first race of the weekend, essentially to kick off everything, was the IndyCar series at Indianapolis. Essentially, the NTT IndyCar series returned to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Will Power started on the pole. He was looking for essentially his fourth win there, breaking the tie between him and Simon Pagenaud with 3 wins each, and continuing Roger Penske's streak of winning every single GMR Grand Prix run at Indianapolis. And Power started off controlling the race early in the stages while leaving essentially everyone in the competition behind. Jack Harvey was running in second place, having a really good run. Pit stops started coming, the first pit stops, and then here comes the second pit stops, and that's when Oliver Askew essentially lost control of his McLaren and slammed the outside wall. This made a situation where we saw Will Power and Jack Harvey had to make that second pit stop under the yellow, lose all the track positions, but drivers like Scott Dixon, who had pitted 2 laps prior to the caution, essentially gained track position and essentially inherit the lead. This really took Will Power out, especially when Will Power stalled exiting pit road area. Now, with all the different strategy we saw, 3-2 stop strategies, it was looking like a really good race, but it was still going to be very hard to catch up to Scott Dixon. Kobe, I know Scott Dixon. He won at Texas. He was really strong today. Is he the man to beat in the IndyCar series?
Absolutely, Scott Dixon has been on fire so far in 2020. It seems like so far, Texas and then the Indy Grand Prix on the road course. Scott Dixon has been absolutely dominant, and it would not surprise me if Scott Dixon is the one who wins the championship this year, because Scott Dixon, got a highly respected engineer Michael Cannon on the Ganassi squad now, and it seems like that Scott Dixon and Michael Cannon are definitely going to be money for Chip Ganassi, who truly loves his winners.
Definitely money indeed. If it went on essentially to win the race, it was essentially all Scott Dixon, no competition really. but there was some good competition throughout the race, including for second place, which Graham Rahal was able to hold off Simon Pagenaud. Colton Herta, Rinus VK, the rookie, fifth place with Ed Carpenter's Racing. Great job for him. Marcus Ericsson, Joseph Newgarden, Patricia O'Ward, eighth place. Santino Ferrucci brings home ninth for Dale Coyne Racing, and Takuma Sato essentially rounding out the top 10 for the IndyCar series. Now, one of the things you notice that is not on the list is essentially Andretti Autosport. Now, Colton Herta is with Steinbrenner, Harding Steinbrenner Racing, which has a partnership with Andretti Autosport. But again, we saw Alexander Rossi had mechanical issue. Ryan Hunter-Reay finished outside the top 10. The highest finishing one was James Hinchcliffe in 11th place. Do you feel Andretti Autosport is behind the ball, and should they be concerned going into the next race weekend?
Yeah, while we've only had two IndyCar races so far this season, I think there's definitely needs to be a little concern in the Andretti camp, especially with that number 27 team of Alexander Rossi. I know with Alexander Rossi, you think that he's going to be very competitive and challenging for the championship year after year, and he's proven that he can get the job done. But it's been an uncharacteristic season for Alexander Rossi, and right now he's in a deep hole when it comes to the championship standings, and it's going to be interesting to see if he's able to climb out of this hole. Yeah, just two races, and we still have much of the season left to go, and Rossi definitely has enough time to make up for two disappointing days at the track.
Yeah, he definitely has the opportunity to still make up. I know it's one of those things where it seems like they're a little bit behind the ball, but definitely they're going to be trying to work on improving. Of course, the next race weekend for the NTT IndyCar Series is the doubleheader at Road America. Essentially, we're going to see IndyCar race Saturday at Road America and then again Sunday at Road America. Be sure to turn in to Grid Live pre-race show, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, as we will preview the IndyCar doubleheader. Of course, we'll also have Formula One returning back to Austria, and NASCAR will be at Kentucky Motor Speedway.
Yeah, yeah. Now we're gonna look at the grid ranking for week 9, and we have a different racer from New Zealand now in the lead, and his name is not Scott McLaughlin. His name is Scott Dixon from the NTT IndyCar Series. Joe, are you surprised that Scott Dixon took first place away from Scott McLaughlin?
I am a bit surprised. It was we've seen in the past IndyCar drivers haven't really led the grid ranking down much. The last time was 2 years ago, 2018, when Sebastian Bourdais led it after the first race weekend. Though he lost it, and then prior to that, Sebastian Bourdais led it for about 4 weeks in 2017. So to see an IndyCar driver lead a grid ranking, that's a really impressive. But of course, the one of the big things to grid rank it, you need two races to get eligible to be scored. So with that said, since he's won 2 for 2, his score is still really high. Let's see what happens at Road America. If he could get third place or better, I still see him possibly leading, and that'll be a first to have an IndyCar driver lead a grid ranking for more than one weekend since it's been a while. But if he doesn't, if he starts to fall back, and that inconsistency, which is sort of the big weakness for NASCAR drivers, is being so consistent in such a long schedule, he might fall back, and we might see Scott McLaughlin again or somebody else recapture the lead of the grid ranking.
Yeah,
And one of
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and Joe, IMSA ran at Daytona last night with the WeatherTech 240, and it was definitely good for IMSA to be able to get the WeatherTech Sports Car Championship back on track. Their first race since the Rolex 24 at Daytona in January. And if you've been following sports car racing, you understand that raced on the 4th of July weekend on the Daytona road course with NASCAR when they ran the 400-mile race under the lights. Before the merger with the Grand Am Rolex Sports Car Series, they used to run what they call the Paul Revere 250 on the Daytona road course on the same weekend as NASCAR, and that race had long disappeared. But with Imson having to cancel some races and do all the rescheduling, they were able to bring back this race. But but under a different name, the WeatherTech 240, and as they returned to action. And it was, and for the most part, the race was really calm. It actually went caution free. We didn't really have a lot of major things happen, but towards the end, the battle for the win in GTLM heated up as Earl Bamber, who was saving field, turned up the heat and tried to attack Antonio Garcia in the number 3 Corvette C8R. And unfortunately for Bamber, he wasn't able to get there. And Antonio Garcia ended up taking the checkered flag, winning for the 100th time for a Corvette racing in IMSA competition. And this was the very first win for the Corvette C8R. And since be going to Le Mans this year, it's going to be a great opportunity for them to further develop their car moving forward, and next year, and what I hope will be a normal racing season, not affected by this pandemic. Corvette will have enough miles on their car so they can take on the Mulsanne straight and Porsche curves and all of that at at the 2021 24 Hours of Le Mans. Yeah, and sharing that class win with Antonio Garcia was Jordan Taylor in his first full time season with Corvette Racing, also claiming overall honors. It was the Mazda Motorsports team, the number 55 Mazda DPI, and a 1-2 finish. And the winners were Jonathan Bomarito and Harry Tinknell. And then claiming GTD class honors, it was the number 14 Aim Vassar Sullivan Lexus GT3 pairing of Jack Hawksworth and Aaron Talese, who is now going to be running the full season as Jack Hawksworth's co-driver after Parker Chase decided to leave the team. Parker Chase is actually going to be shifting his focus towards stock car racing now, joining the Chad Bryant Racing Development Program. It seems like Parker Chase has planned to run some ARCA Menard Series races in stock cars after switching from sports car racing. This is definitely going to be interesting to see how Parker is able to transition from sports cars to stock cars. And we want to thank you for joining us today on the Grit Live Post Race Show. And here's a reminder: tomorrow you can check out the debut of our new program, Rookie Stripes. And then on Wednesday you can catch Grit Tonight. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel in order for you not to miss any of our grid programming. For Joe Samniego, I'm Kobe Lambert. Thank you for watching, and I hope you all have a wonderful night.